Cloud platforms looks overwhelming on the surface. Hundreds of services, endless certifications, confusing documentation. But once you understand how to group them, everything becomes predictable. If you have watched my AWS and Google Cloud video, you already know the pattern. Now it's time for Azure. In my years working with cloud and AI infrastructure, from writing bash scripts to now provisioning GPU clusters with Terraform, I have realized something very simple. Every cloud platform solves similar core problems: identity, compute, networking, storage, observability, cost, automation. The name changes, the architecture patterns do not. So in this video, I'm giving you the Azure blueprint. 7 buckets that covers almost everything you will be touching through your real world cloud roles. For each one, I'll tell you what the service is, why it exists, the mistakes people make, and what you should build to prove that you actually understand. Let's break down Azure properly. Bucket 1, foundation and security. Before you touch a single virtual machine or deploy a container, how Azure organizes its resources. This is different from AWS and GCP, so pay attention here. Azure has a 4-level hierarchy. Management groups at the top, then subscriptions, then resource group, and finally the resources. Subscriptions here are your billing boundary. Think of them as AWS accounts. Everything you deploy lives under a subscription. Most teams use subscription to deploy different environments like dev, test, prod. This keeps your environment isolated and also cost trackable. You can track the cost footprints across different environments or different teams using subscription. Next, resource groups. These are the logical containers inside subscription. Your VM, your database, your storage account, everything lives within a resource group. Here's the important part. When you delete a resource group, everything gets deleted with it. So it's useful during cleanup, but also it's a bit risky. So one of the best practices here is to group things by life cycle. Things that get deployed together, deleted together, should live together. As a learner, you won't need these yet, but do know that in enterprises, management groups are used in order to apply policies and security groups across multiple subscriptions. One more thing to note here is naming and tags. Azure resource names cannot be changed after it's created. So name things consistently from day one and use tags like environment equal to dev, department equal to finance to track costs and ownership. This saves you a lot of pain down the line. One gotcha that trips people up constantly: unlike GCP projects, Azure resource groups have a home region, but the resource inside the resource groups can live in different regions. So resource groups have a region assigned and the resources can live in any region. Let me give you an example. Your resource group might be in the East US region, but a VM inside it could be running in the West Europe region. They're separate concepts, so don't assume co-location here. Now here's the day one action. Go to portal.azure.com, create a free account. You get $3 in credits for 30 days. So start getting familiar with the portal and make sure you add a spending alert so that you know you're not spending out of your credits. Next within this bucket is Microsoft Entra ID. Formerly it was known as Azure Active Directory or Azure AD. So if you see that name anywhere, that's the old name. It was renamed as Microsoft Entra ID in 2023. Many of the certifications, YouTube tutorials still refer the old name, so don't get confused. Now what is it? It's an identity and access management platform. It controls who can do what in Azure. Now 3 concepts you need to know within this: user, groups, service principals. They are your identity. Roles are bundles of permissions and you assign roles to identity. For roles, you have got some built-in ones like owner, contributor, reader. Owner is like the admin role, so it's the most powerful one. Don't try to assign it in production systems. And you have specific roles like storage, blob, data, reader. So use that instead of using the broad ones. Service principals are especially the important one here. When an application needs to access Azure resources, you don't give it a person's login. You create a service principal. It's basically an identity associated to your application or your automation script, similar to service accounts in GCP. Now, the most important thing to note here is follow the least privilege principle. Give to users, to systems, to application. Make sure you only give the minimum permissions that's required for it to do its task. Don't overkill it. Also, key thing to note during interviews. Now, next thing in the foundations and security bucket is the Azure Key Vault. What is it? It's the secret management, similar to AWS and GCP Secret Manager. So you never hardcode connection strings, API keys, or passwords ever. The Key Vault service stores your secrets, certifications, and encryption keys, and your application fetches it during runtime using its identity. Remember, we talked about identity with service principals, that identity. So there are no credentials in your code. Now we jump into bucket 2. This is a compute and containers bucket. Every organization needs compute. And in 2026, with AI models running everywhere, compute increasingly means accelerated machines like GPUs and containers, not just virtual machines. Let's start with our very first compute service, that is Azure Virtual Machines. It's basically VMs in the cloud. It comes in the infrastructure as a service layer. Microsoft manages the hardware and you manage everything on top: configuring servers, runtime, deploying code, everything. When do you need it? For traditional applications, running databases, anything that doesn't fit serverless. All in all, we'll go into the serverless later on. And if you need GPU resources, VMs are your go-to. So one of the things you need to be familiar with is the different series VMs. Like NC series VMs comes with NVIDIA's A100 and H100 GPU. ND series are optimized for distributed training workloads, and NV series are for inference and visualization workloads. Now within Azure, you can create both Linux VM and Windows VM. You go to our portal, search for virtual machines. In the virtual machine page, you select create, and when the page opens, you follow the steps like giving the instance details like image, machine type, inbound port rules, etc. You can leave the remaining defaults and then hit the create button. So one thing you need to do when you're visiting this bucket is launch those instances, both Windows and Linux. Then SSH into the Linux box, RDP into the Windows box, and do a very simple task of installing a web server. That's it. There's a difference between stopping a VM and deallocating a VM. If you shut down a VM from inside your operating system, Azure is still charging you. In order to stop it completely, make sure you deallocate it either from CLI or through the console. Our number 2 compute service is Azure Functions. This is our serverless compute. It doesn't mean that it doesn't operate on a server, but the key differentiator here is that you are not managing that server. You live with the idea of it being a serverless. You write a code, you set a trigger, Azure runs it, and you manage nothing. This service is a part of function as a service, similar to AWS Lambda or GCP Cloud Run function. Key things here to note for this service is be familiar with one coding language because you write your code in either Python, Java, Node.js, and then be familiar with API. You trigger your function on an HTTP call, a timer, a storage event, or a service bus, or a message coming in through your event bus. That's it. One gotcha and an interview question here is, since functions are fully serverless, they're not running for you. So when there's a trigger and the function runs, there would be some cold starts. So your first invocation will take several seconds to warm up. There are patterns like keep warm pattern that you can apply here. But in case of interview questions around like running critical production systems, would you be running functions? I'll let you answer that. Our next service is AKS, aka Azure Kubernetes Service. It's a management Kubernetes layer. You get the full control over your containers, and Azure manages your control plane for free. You only pay for the worker node VMs. Now, when does AKS make sense? Custom networking, stateful workloads, which means you need to keep your application connected to a storage or a database. Also, one of the key differentiators of AKS here is AI workloads. AKS scales up to 5,000 nodes per cluster. That's an enterprise-grade platform. So in case of heavy AI usage, where models are getting productionalized, AKS is the way to go. Like I said, the control plane is free, but you are still charged for your worker nodes. And if you're using GPU workloads, then you have to keep an eye on your billing and make sure you understand about the upgrade policies as well, how maintenance happens, how auto upgrade works. Again, these are some key points for interviews. Next one in the compute bucket is the Azure Container Apps. These are serverless containers built on top of Kubernetes and fully managed. So in AKS, there was still an administrator from your team working on setting up the Kubernetes cluster, provisioning node pools, configuring nodes, etc. Here you just deploy your containers. Another great point here with Azure Container Apps that it scales to 0. And the best part here is revision management. These are mostly used for dev, testing containers, where you can test different versions and also roll back to the previous version. Now, keeping to note here, if you want to customize your Kubernetes environment within Azure Container Apps, you cannot do that. You cannot deploy CRDs and implement custom CNI plugins. You just get your container app. That's it. The infra part is something Azure manages here. So if you need customization, go to AKS. There's also another compute service called Azure Container Instances. I always used to get confused between apps and instances, but one key thing to note here as a differentiator is that Azure Container Instances is ideal for running single isolated containers. In Azure Container Apps, you can have multiple containers. Here, you can have single container. Mostly used for running simple tasks, posty jobs, and again, no infrastructure management. Microsoft explicitly mentions this as a building block and not a platform. So there's no auto scaling, no load balancing, no scaling up and down to 0. There's some default limit of 100 container groups per subscription. So just understand why container instances are used versus why container apps are used. It's just a build flexibility, and one is used mostly for development testing and other can be used as like a container platform. Next one is Azure App Service. Fully managed hosting for web apps, REST APIs, and mobile backends. No containers, no clusters. Just get your code and deploy it. There's some limits around what programming languages it supports, so keep an eye on that. And the main use case for Azure App Service is when you are building a simple REST API or a web app and your team just want to ship code and not manage infrastructure at all. Our last one in this bucket is Azure Batch. It's a managed service for large scale parallel computing. Don't get confused with words. Think of it like when there are like large data processing pipelines. There could be multiple jobs in the pipeline to extract, transform, load. You can use Azure Batch for that. Basically, it provides a scaling infrastructure that can run your task efficiently, and it can also scale to 0 when there's no job running. Now, here's the compute decision tree. If you need short-lived containers, go to container instances. If you need microservices with scale to 0 option, go to container apps. You need full Kubernetes control, go to AKS. For event-driven functions, go to Azure Functions. Need large-scale parallel jobs, Azure Batch is the way to go. So the pattern here is the more control you need, the more you take on, like the more you manage the infrastructure. Keep that in mind. Now, our bucket 3 is storage and databases. Every workload needs somewhere to put its data, right? So we start with Azure Blob Storage. It's the object storage. This is where basically you store your unstructured data, media assets like images or videos, machine learning datasets, model artifacts, application logs, backups, disaster recovery files, really anything that isn't a database row. There are 4 storage tiers and this matters the most. Number 1 is hot. As the name suggests, it is for the data you access frequently. It has higher storage cost and lower access cost. Access here is read and write operations. A second storage tier is cool. It is for the data maybe you access once in a month. Now it's opposite to hot storage. Lower storage cost, higher access cost. And also it has a minimum 30-day retention policy. Now the third storage type is cold. This is different than cool. It is for data you rarely access. This has minimum 90-day retention policy. So what does retention policy means here? Once data is stored, it must be stored for at least the period before it can be deleted or moved without a penalty. So look at the billing aspects of it as well. A fourth storage type is archival. It's for data you almost never touch. It could be compliance archives, long-term backups. It's also the cheapest tier, but also rehydration takes up to 15 days, which means archived data cannot be accessed immediately. Our next storage type is Azure Managed Disk. It's a block storage for VMs, just like the persistent disk. This is basically what your VM's operating system and data drives actually run on. Four types to be aware about: the standard hard disk drive or standard HDD for dev and test environments. Then there's standard SSD for balanced workloads, premium SSD for production databases, which has like the higher IOPS. And then there's also Ultra Disk, which is used for the most demanding scenarios, like sub-millisecond latency and mission critical database. Key points to note here is, like, for instance, Ultra Disk is not available in every region, so be aware of region availability across services as well. Our next storage type is Azure Files. It's a fully managed file share. Think of it as mounted directories. There's this file storage and multiple VMs can access or share the data simultaneously. One of the key things to note here is you use SMB protocols for Windows workloads and NFS protocols for Linux. One of the key use cases that I've been seeing a lot is it being used as a shared persistent storage across Kubernetes workloads or Kubernetes VMs. Our next one is Azure File Sync. It helps in extending your Azure files to your on-prem Windows servers. So think of it as like a hybrid approach where you can manage both on-prem and cloud servers and have a common file share. So even on-prem VMs can access this file share. Now there's also Azure NetApp Files. It is also one of the enterprise grade file shares, and this is mostly for having like the best throughput or latency requirements. So it's similar to Azure Files but better performance. Now we enter into the database layer. Azure offers SQL database as a managed service. It's a fully managed SQL server. So Microsoft handles patching, backups, and high availability. Your job is just to store the data and query it. So the answer to that is no. Azure SQL database is not similar to a SQL server running on a VM. So there's something called Database Migration Assistant within Azure, which will help you flag some compatibility issues and plan your migration accordingly. Another key thing to note is the purchasing models. There's three models: DTU, vCore, and serverless. So know about like how serverless purchase model works and the pros and cons here. Like, you'll pay less, but it also has cold starts. There's also Azure SQL Managed Instance. This is similar to your SQL server running on a VM. Like in Azure SQL database, there could be some compatibility issues when you're migrating a full database running on a VM to the service model, but here it's almost the same. So as a step one, a lot of companies do this. They first deploy it into SQL Managed Instance, check the SQL Server compatibility, so you have more control here. And later on, you can obviously migrate to the database version because it's like more production ready. Azure also has Cosmos DB. It's the globally distributed multi-model NoSQL database. To use Cosmos DB for more like real-time data, also for multi-modal applications. It also powers AI applications like ChatGPT. So the key thing to note here, it's the NoSQL database version from Azure, and it's great again for serverless applications. That means like an order of millisecond response times. Also need to scale rapidly and globally. Azure Database also offers other flavors like PostgreSQL and MySQL. Again, fully managed open source relational databases, no patching required, no infrastructure management. Then the other database type is Azure Managed Redis. This is used to cache database query results. So you don't keep hammering your database on every request. It stores user session data, leaderboards. Again, an interview question. Every production application needs a caching layer. This is the one for databases. Azure also has AI search. Now, Azure AI search is very critical now. It's a managed search service, which helps you index your data and run full text and vector searches. Now, this is widely used in RAG pipelines. If you don't know RAG, it's like retrieval augmentation generation pipeline. This is how your models fetches newer data. So your AI models can retrieve relevant documents at runtime to answer questions. There's another service called Azure Synapse Analytics. It is an analytics, like the name suggests, it's an analytics platform that combines data warehousing and big data processing in one service. Think of it like BigQuery. It is used to analyze large data sets using SQL, Spark, and data pipelines. Do check out this decision tree before you move further. Our bucket 4, networking and content delivery. We start with Azure Virtual Network, known as VNet. It's your private network in Azure. This is where your resources live and communicate. One of the big differences from other cloud providers like GCP, VNets are regional. Resources in East US and West Europe are in separate VNets by default. To connect those two resources in different regions, you need to use VNet peering. Within VNets, you can deploy different subnets, which helps you segment your private network. You can assign a portion of your virtual network address to each subnet, and then you can deploy resources in specific subnets. Next, we have load balancers. This comes up in almost every Azure interview. There are 4 options and they are not interchangeable. Azure has few different load balancing services, and the key difference is where they operate in the networking stack. First is Azure Load Balancer. This works at layer 4, the transport layer. It handles TCP and UDP traffic, so it's fast and simple, but it doesn't understand HTTP and application logic. Next is Application Gateway. This operates at layer 7, the application layer. It understands HTTP and HTTPS traffic, which means it can do things like SSL termination, URL based routing, and it also includes built-in web application firewall. Then there's Azure Front Door. Think of this as the global entry point for your Azure application. It combines CDN, global load balancing, and WAF and web application firewall, aka WAF, making it ideal for serving your applications across multiple regions. And finally, Traffic Manager. It works a bit differently. It's the DNS based routing. It doesn't sit in the traffic path. Instead, it routes the DNS queries to the best endpoint based on things like geography, privacy, or health checks. Next service within this bucket is Azure Private Endpoint. Now, this is a very key service you should be aware of. Normally, when your application within a VNet tries to connect to other services like storage, Key Vault, SQL database, that traffic goes over the public internet, even though if that particular service is within that Microsoft's network. A private endpoint changes that. It gives the service a private IP within your VNet, so your resources can connect to it privately without exposing the service to the public internet. I'll give you an example here. If your VM inside a VNet needs to connect to a storage service or block storage, you can use the private endpoint, so the traffic between those two stays completely private and inside your network. No public endpoints, no internet exposure. It's one of the very common pattern used for secure architectures within Azure. Let's jump into bucket 5, DevOps and automation. Just like Terraform and any other IAC service, Azure offers Azure Bicep. This is instead of ARM templates. This is Azure's native infrastructure as code language, which is used to deploy resources like VMs, network, storage. It's a language. It's much more simpler and readable than ARM templates, and also the recommended way to manage Azure infrastructure. Next, we have Terraform on Azure. As you already know, Terraform is a multi-cloud IAC tool, so it can be used to provision infrastructure in Azure as well. A lot of companies go for Terraform so that they can manage and provision infrastructure across multiple cloud providers. Next, we have Azure DevOps pipelines. It's a CI/CD service that's used to build, test, and deploy directly from repositories. It's commonly used in enterprise environments that are using Azure DevOps ecosystem. We also have GitHub Actions. It's again a CI/CD automation system built directly with GitHub repositories. Both GitHub Actions and Azure DevOps pipelines have almost the same use case, and the enterprises pick based on their current setup. Next, we have Azure Service Bus. It's a messaging service built for reliable communication between applications, just like a message bus. So for example, if you want to process an order, the service bus is the key between payment, inventory, and shipping services, and it makes sure that it communicates reliably. Then we have Azure Event Grids. This service is used to react to infrastructure events. Basically, when there's a file upload or a resource change, it's like a PubSub. It quickly sends one event to multiple subscribers to take further actions on it. Then we have Azure Event Hubs. It's a high throughput event streaming platform used to collect massive amounts of telemetry data, majorly used for IoT applications. Our last one is Azure Logic Apps. It's majorly used to build integration workflows between APIs, SaaS platforms, and other enterprise systems without heavy coding. As an example, whenever a new record is added to a database, this service can send an email notification to the right stakeholders. Another service is Azure Container Registry. This is a private registry that stores and manages your container images. It integrates directly with AKS, App Service, and your CI/CD pipelines. Simple workflow here is you can store your Docker images to ACR and then deploy it to the AKS cluster. Let's jump into bucket 6. That's AI and machine learning. This is where Microsoft is going all in. Number 1, we have Azure OpenAI service. It's an enterprise version of OpenAI models like GPT-4, Whisper. All are hosted inside Azure. This is used when companies need secure access to AI models within Azure environments. For example, if a company already has an application within Azure and they want to build an AI assistant, they can integrate models using this service. Next one is Azure Machine Learning. This is an end-to-end platform to train, manage, and deploy models in production. It provides compute clusters, model registry, and manage endpoints for inference. A simple use case is training a fraud detection model and then deploying it to an API for real-time predictions. You see end-to-end. Then we have Azure AI Services. This is like again a managed AI platform where you'll get pre-built AI APIs for vision, speech, document processing. You don't need to train any model here. You just call the API and get structured results. As an example, you can extract invoice details from a PDF using document intelligence. Then we have Azure AI Foundry. This is a platform for building production AI applications and agents, including RAG pipelines, prompt management, and model evaluation. This service sits on top of Azure ML and Azure OpenAI. Now, let's jump into bucket 7. This is monitoring and cost, the most important one. First, we have Azure Monitor. It's a central observability platform that collects metrics, logs, traces from your resources. It basically helps team to monitor infrastructure and troubleshoot issues. Then we have Application Insights. This is the APM, aka Application Performance Monitoring Service. It's used to track requests, failures, and the most important, latency in applications. It helps developers understand how apps actually behave in production. Basically, if your end user is getting higher response times, this is where you go to track it. Next is Microsoft Sentinel. This is a cloud native CM platform used for security monitoring, threat detection, also for automated incident response. It analyzes all the security logs from all the infrastructure components deployed in your Azure environment. Then we have Microsoft Defender for cloud. It's a security posture management tool that constantly scans your cloud resources. Also check for misconfigurations and vulnerabilities. The best part is it gives you security scores and recommendation on how to improve your security posture. It's very key for interviews. Then the last one is Azure Cost Management. This is the tool used to monitor and control your cloud spending. And also the tool the companies are heavily invested into because of the growing cost. It tracks your subscriptions, services, resources, helps you create cost analytic dashboards, budget alerts, and also give you optimization recommendations. Now, before we wrap up, you need to further dive into each of these services and make sure you're doing things hands-on rather than just reading docs. So for that, these are the 3 projects you must track. The first project is Secure Static Website with CDN. It helps you deploy your static website to blob storage. And there are other components like Azure Front Door that you can integrate with it. Number 2 project is Containerized APIs with AKS and CI/CD. Here you will build a REST API, containerize it with Docker, and then push it to Azure Container Registry, deploy it to AKS. You will get a lot of hands-on experience with this project. We will get familiar with tools like Docker, AKS, ACR, GitHub Actions, Kubernetes deployments. So make sure you do it. Our number 3 project is deploy 3-tier e-commerce application. Here you'll understand how 3-tier architecture actually looks like, how different services connect, and how you can containerize each service and ensure it communicates reliably. All the 3 projects with the learning resources are in the document below. If this helped, drop a comment telling me what you're building next. Also, if you have any feedback, see you in the next video.